Seatbelt pads, great idea. One that I can do really easily and really quickly because I've probably made about 5,000 of these. I used to have a business making things for people with disabilities, and making seatbelt pads that had little pockets inside to put medical information was one of my best sellers. So I can show you how to make these without any problem. It'll be a one video show because they are very, very quick, and it's difficult to give you a size because it will depend on what size you want them to be. However, what I have is a rectangle, and I'm using anti-pill fleece. This is that soft stuff that you make sweatshirts out of, and this has an obvious front and back. Some of them don't. Some of them look exactly the same on both sides. You could, if you wanted to use a cotton on the front, makes no difference. I like to use fleece on both sides, but I do like to use fleece on one side because fleece grips onto the seatbelt and stops. If you're making a seatbelt pad, you don't really want it slip sliding up and down the seatbelt. The other thing that these are really great for is if you've got a child in a pushchair or a buggy. Often the straps catch on their shoulders. I know my granddaughter gets little red welts on her neck where the straps catch on her shoulders. And the pads that came with her pushchair, buggy thing, have got kind of they're made of a sort of a thickish waterproof material, and they're bound around the outside, so they're quite rough. These are much, much softer. So what we're going to need 2 pieces of fabric. So ideally one would be anti-pill fleece. The other can be either fleece or cotton or whatever you fancy it being, because that will be the outside. And a piece of batting of some sort. This is cheap polyester 2-ounce wadding, batting, whatever you want to call it. It depends if you're a quilter or what you're using it for. It's the stuff that you can pick up for a couple of pounds on eBay. It really isn't of any great quality. It's stretchy. You can kind of see through it. You can actually see through that. And you'll need some hook and loop tape, which the trade name for it's Velcro. This isn't Velcro, this is hook and loop because it's not made by Velcro. It's considerably cheaper. This is actually 3/4 of, this is 20 millimeters. It's 3/4 of an inch wide, but you could use 1/2 inch wide without any problem at all. So that's all you're going to need. I'm going to put that over there because I don't need that at the moment. So you're going to take your 2 pieces of fabric, whether that's 1 piece of fleece and 1 piece of cotton, 2 pieces of fleece, whichever, and lay them right sides together. And these 2 rectangles are 7 inches wide. Now, 7 inches wide is the standard, fits a standard seat belt. I've made these 12 inches long. You could make them longer, you could make them shorter. It's the width that's the important bit because it needs to wrap around a seat belt and cling onto it it needs to be relatively stable, otherwise it'll just slide up and down the seat belt. So you're going to lay those 2 pieces right sides together. Then you're going to lay your piece of fleece on the top and then turn the whole thing over. Now if you want to put clips around the outside to hold it all together, you can do. I'm not going to. So as I say, I have made quite literally thousands of these, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to stitch all the way around the outside, leaving a sort of a 2-inch gap on that short end. Again, I'm not measuring it, just a gap big enough to be able to turn through. I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance because we don't want big bulky bits in the sides, and I'm just going to back stitch a couple of times. Now if you wanted to put a little pocket on the inside, if you're using fleece like I am for the inside, you can literally just cut a small rectangle of fleece and sew it onto the right side, just in the center, just enough to be able to put information in if you want to. My parents have these on their seat belts because both of them take medication, and there was always a concern that if anything happened and there was a car crash, they could be pulled out of a car and nobody would know what their medications were. So both of my parents have these, and I have an embroidery machine, and I've embroidered the medical alert logo on the front cover of them. And inside they have a little pocket which has their name, medical details, emergency contact numbers, and what have you. I've also made one that goes on my granddaughter's buggy because my son has some medical conditions, and if he were to become unwell when he was out with her, it would be good for people to know that who to contact and what medications he takes. So that's very useful. or you can just use them to make your seatbelt more comfortable, because I've always had Hyundai cars, and I currently have a Fiat 500, and most of my cars have always had a seatbelt adjuster on the side, so you can adjust how high the seatbelt sits so it doesn't cut into your neck. My little Fiat, much as I love the car, does not have that adjustable seatbelt thing. So basically, in the summertime, and it's only in the summer when I've got vests on and I've got kind of bare shoulders, it catches on my neck sometimes. A little uncomfortable. So there we go. We now have all of that attached together. I've got that little gap. My fleece is on the back and it's just caught in the stitching. Now I've got the fleece is stretched a little bit, so I'm just gonna, I say fleece, the wadding stuff. So I'm just gonna trim off those little bits. I'm going to, as we would with a pocket, trim off those corners, being careful that I don't cut into my stitching, because we don't want it all to unravel, because that would be really bad. And then let's get rid of my threads. I'm going to turn it right side out through that gap, but I must make sure that my fleecy wadding stuff stays inside. So it's going to go, the fleece will end up on the inside, the wadding. So I'm going to turn it through the gap. You can see the fleece is now disappearing inside. I'm going to pull out the corners, because this is made with anti-pill fleece. The corners never look very square because it's quite thick and bulky, and that's fine, it doesn't matter. So now what you've got is a rectangle that's lovely and soft and padded, and it's got that open bit at that end, and you can see as I pull that those two open bits just pull inside, so you can pop a clip or a pin through there. And what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch down both of the short ends. We're not top stitching the sides though, just the short ends. Just a couple of back stitches. And that will close that turning gap that we made. Now if you're using fleece like this, you can actually miss off the wadding part inside, because the fleece itself is actually quite thick and will give a bit of padding to it. If you're just using cotton on the front and fleece on the back, then I think the wadding just gives it a little bit of extra comfort value. These can be washed, and the ones that we've got in our house certainly get washed a great deal. Don't tumble dry them though if you're using polyester wadding, because the polyester wadding ends up going into a bit of a ball inside and they're not very nice. So we've top stitched down both ends, and that's now completely sealed. There's no open gaps. We've just got this nice paddy thing, seatbelt pad. Right, so now we're going to take our piece of hook and loop, and this is a bit crinkly because it's been curled up in my drawer, so let me just pull those two pieces apart and then join them together to make sure they're the same length. It's funny stuff this, I don't like Velcro much, so you're not allowed to refer to it as Velcro unless it's actually made by Velcro. So I'm going to pop it up against the side of my pad, just cut it so that it's about 1/4 of an inch shorter than the entire length, and then with two bits joined together, because that way you know that you're getting them both the same, just round off the ends, and that's both, I've got both bits stuck together there, so you've got the hook and the loop, and they're both rounded off. And the reason we do that is because this stuff is blooming sharp, and that, if it sticks into you, is uncomfortable. So we're going to do that on both ends. Just round it off, it's not a problem. And get rid of those little sharp bits. So now you're going to lay your hook and loop down one side of your pad as close to the edge as you can. You can clip it in place just to make sure it doesn't move. Now most hook and loop or Velcro or whatever it is you're using has a sort of a channel down both sides that isn't covered in either the hooks or the loops, and it's the easiest place to stitch. If you on the hooks, on the loopy side, you can stitch more or less anywhere and it isn't a bother, but on the hook side, if you try and stitch over that, it'll catch on your thread and it sometimes shreds your thread because it's quite sharp. So it doesn't matter whether you put this on the front or the back, as long as you put the two pieces on the opposite sides. So it doesn't matter whether you're which way round you're doing. And now what we're going to do is we are going to stitch all the way around that piece of hook and loop. And I'm just going to do a back stitch at the beginning. So you want your Velcro stuff right at the edge of your pad that you've created. Now, sometimes I find that you might need a slightly bigger needle for this, because you're going through quite a lot of layers on this outside. It really depends on how thick your fabrics are and how capable your machine is of coping with thicker layers. But take it slowly. Come all the way down one side, round that curve. Probably would have been better if I'd have used white thread, but not to worry. All the way up the other side. And what I will say is that these do not take the place of any standard safety padding that you have on things like children's car seats and what have you. If you were to take off padding that's on a car seat and replace it with something like this, and then have an accident, your insurance would not be valid for any injury that happened to any child. So please don't think, oh, I'll make some jazzy ones for my grandchild and put them on their car seat, because that's not a good idea. Car seats are standard safety tested, so you must, if you're going to replace anything, you must make sure it's replaced with something that is actually safety tested, and these obviously aren't because we're making them now and I'm not a safety tester. But they're ideal for a seatbelt in a car, because they don't impact on the way seatbelts work in a car. So I have my piece of Velcro attached along one of the long sides. I'm now going to turn it over, and I'm going to take my second piece of Velcro, hook and loop, whatever, and I'm going to attach it on the other side. I'll make you laugh because I actually have some in my car. I'll take a photo that I embroidered the Fiat 500 logo on them because I thought they were pretty cool. I saw some for sale and thought, no, I'm not paying that. They were very expensive. And Fiat actually do some, but they're about 40 quid and I wasn't paying that. So we're just going to stitch again around the outside and take it slowly on the hook one. That's the rough one, the one with the hooks, because if you, especially when you're going around those curves, because you will be sewing over the hooks and sometimes that will shred your threads if you go too quickly. So take it nice and slowly and sew down that channel, the sort of margins on the side of your hook and loop that don't have any hooks and loops on it. That's the best way to sew this stuff. If you've only got the self-adhesive hook and loop, and you can get it with sort of a sticky back on it, don't try and sew over that. I've tried it, it's not a good thing to do. It just gums your needle up and it's horrible. You just won't get a decent stitch because the glue just is like chewing gum. It's horrible stuff. So go all the way down one side. Now, if you wanted to make these double-sided, you could put, oh, I think I've just thrown a load of clips down the back of my sewing machine. Nothing unusual there. You could put different colour fleece on both sides, and then they can literally be turned either way, so you can ring the changes. A couple of back stitches to secure your threads. Trim off any ends you've got. And now we have a nice rectangle with hook and loop that side, hook and loop that side. And all we're going to do is fold in one side, fold in the other side, and there you go. It's completely secure. It will thread onto your seat belt and stay nicely on your seat belt. I'll take a couple of pictures of this on said seat belt. Obviously my car is outside, I don't have it in my sewing room. And that's a seatbelt pad. Simple as that. Really simple, simple, simple. 7 inches wide by as long as you want it to be. And you could, in theory, you could make a seatbelt pad that went right down. I wouldn't use anything too long, because obviously your seatbelt needs to be able to jar as you move it. These are also great for wheelchair users if they've got a lap belt, because lap belts can cut in sometimes. So you can put them on either side of a lap belt, either side of a harness on a lap belt. You could use them on the straps of a rucksack if you've got a rucksack or a backpack that's got those sort of what's it called, the webbing straps. They cut into your shoulders sometimes. Most of them these days have padding on the shoulders, but if you've got webbing, then you could use it on a backpack. You could make them shorter, you can make them longer, but it's really a rectangle with 2 pieces of hook and loop, and it works a treat. Now if you have an aversion to hook and loop, and I know some people do, you could use cam snaps, and you'd put, again, you'd do the same thing as this. You'd put your cam snaps, you'd put the male part, so you'd perhaps maybe put 1, 2, 3, I don't know, 5 or something along there. So you'd put 5 of them so that they're all with the dome part on the back and the male part facing upwards, and then you turn it over again, dome part on the back and the female part facing upwards, and then you could just, again, roll it in, and it's job done. Really, really easy. What a great idea. I'm glad somebody mentioned that. I can't remember who it was that mentioned it. But I have literally made hundreds of these, thousands of them. And I've embroidered names on the front. I've embroidered medical logos. I've embroidered things like, I've got epilepsy, look inside for further information, and then popped just a small pocket on the back that you can literally slot information in. If you're going to do that and use a pad like that, make sure that when you print, you can print that. A small pocket that's about 4 inches by 2 inches will hold a sheet of A4 that's been folded up. If you're going to put medical information into or anything like that into something like this, make sure that you put a small photo on that piece of paper that you put in of the person who the information is about, because we know that sometimes somebody else might drive the car, and you would hate for somebody to be rescued from a car crash. Heaven forbid that anybody is in a car crash and it has somebody else's medical information inside. So having a small photograph of the person whose medical information is enclosed in it is a really good idea, so that any kind of rescue services can see that it's not the right person or it is the right person. You could put things like NHS numbers, current treatments, medication, emergency contacts, anything people need to be aware of, allergies and that sort of stuff. All of those things go in really well. I know people that have epilepsy that have these on seat belts or on pushchairs, if they're out with their children and they would have a seizure. I put the medical logo, the emergency response medical logo, or even just embroidered medical information inside on the front of it. And you'd put your medical information inside on the centre at the centre of the front panel, because once you've folded these over, that information will be on the front and clearly visible to anybody that's an emergency responder, whether that's on a nappy bag, on a pushchair or buggy, on a seat belt, wherever you want to put it, wherever it's appropriate for you to have it. And there we go. Simple as that. Great idea. Well done, ladies.